Alright YouTube, I was asked to do a video on what I think of the JFK assassination. I'm going to lump RFK in because don't these two events seem linked? I think so. Now supposedly, JFK is killed by a lone nut, Lee Harvey Oswald, under very strange circumstances. RFK then separately is also killed by a lone nut, who has nothing in connection really with Oswald and has his own grievance against RFK, I suppose. These things do not add up. You've got two people, same administration, same family, getting assassinated under similarly mysterious circumstances by parties that supposedly in both cases were acting alone, had nothing ideologically necessarily in common. I don't think that that adds up. I think the two are connected. And that's why I think that the official storyline given on both is bunk, honestly. I don't think that Saran killed RFK. I simply don't think so. And I don't even think Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. Here's what I think happened. I am of the belief, and I'm not sure if anyone else has echoed this sentiment, that Lee Harvey Oswald, as well as probably other unnamed individuals in the crowd in Dallas on that day, that fateful day when JFK was killed, was not there to kill JFK, but was there to guard JFK. I think that JFK and his family were, in a roundabout sense, mafia assets, and that this same mafia supplied manpower to act in the shadows as an extra layer of security, and thus Oswald was literally up there perched with a rifle to gaze over the crowd and make sure nobody took a shot at JFK. Why would he flee? Because he had failed in his role specifically and was afraid of getting whacked by the mafia, specifically because otherwise he might blow the cover of the entire operation. I think JFK didn't trust the Secret Service. He came out against the CIA quite clearly on several occasions. Said, yeah, I'm going to scatter them to the winds and so forth. And WikiLeaks has alluded to this, that he would go after certain aspects of the intelligence community, that he was tired of the military-industrial complex and so forth, wanted to perhaps work more closely with Russia or something along those lines. Naturally, when you claim that you want to destroy an intelligence bureau altogether and scatter it to the winds, people, in alliance with that intelligence bureau may not like that very much. I think that the real parties responsible for JFK's murder were a combination of sorts. I think it involved LBJ, who personally benefited from JFK and RFK being killed. I think he was involved. But I don't think he was the mastermind. I think he was approached by people within the intelligence community, Secret Service, CIA, whatever, and they convinced him that JFK was a threat. They looked back at the Cuban Missile Crisis, said, you realize we were closer than 2 minutes to midnight. We very almost got annihilated. JFK is too dangerous to continue in this role, but we need your complicity. We need, as who would become the president, to guard our national security. He has to get out. And he's not willing to resign, and he's got RFK there and so forth. We need to take care of this problem. I think they approached LBJ first, and they made sure, of course, he was out of the line of fire. And LBJ said, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine with me, because he didn't like JFK. He wanted to be president himself. I think this is also why he didn't seek re-election. After he finishes out for JFK, runs again, then he sort of disappears off into the hinterlands, almost acts like a very depressed, broken man, grows a beard, becomes somewhat erratic and a shut-in. I think he felt guilt. I think he realized that he had been fooled. Specifically, he had been told JFK was a threat, JFK was this and that, and womanizing and so forth, and so when he gave his consent for JFK to be removed by the intelligence community under whatever pretenses they fed to him. Could have been fake documents. Oh yeah, JFK's actually commie. Or it could be, oh, JFK is going to try to start a nuclear war again. This time he might succeed. We got to stop him. I think that when he realized that that was all false, he felt actual tangible guilt. I've looked down on LBJ before, but I think I've got a different understanding of him now. I think that he was a guilty feeling man who suffered, whether you agree with the moral argument of why he would be suffering for such a thing when he was probably fooled into supporting such a plan. I think that he felt guilty. I don't think that he was a necessarily evil character. I think he was just, because he was egotistical and he sought sort of the fame and the power, I think he was easily led by other people who manipulated him. So Lee Harvey Oswald, I think, was quite literally a patsy. He was up in the balcony specifically to guard JFK. I doubt he even fired a shot. He then ran because he realized, oh shit, I'm supposed to be protecting JFK right now. He just got his head blown off. What the fuck is happening? This isn't supposed to happen. He bolts. Makes a perfect excuse because he happens to be armed and in a position overlooking the plaza. And Ruby there, who kills Oswald, was simply the man sent to shut him up, to keep him from talking to the press, to keep him from talking to the local police, to make sure that the only people that were around him for the very short time he would remain alive would be assets that were involved with JFK's killing, literally members of the Secret Service, the CIA, and so forth. I think that's what happened. I think it's possible that the Soviet Union itself was involved. They may have come forth, reached across the Atlantic and spoken directly to the CIA and said, you do realize your president almost annihilated your country as well as ours. Don't you think this is a problem? In fact, it may have been a perfect storm of parties thinking they were acting benevolently. The CIA may have judged that JFK actually was off his rocker, was going to cause a nuclear war. The Soviet Union may have done the same, and technically they were right when they considered that, when you look at the nuclear subs that almost started firing torpedoes there off the coast of Cuba in one incident. And LBJ, fooled by whatever party, would have thought the same. That is, each of these individual parties, acting perhaps in tandem, perhaps on their own, separately even, all of these different parties thought that they were doing the right thing, only to then accidentally destroy Americana and usher in a much darker period in our U.S. history. So I think that JFK was either being looked over by the mob, or here's the other possibility. The other possibility is that the mob was there to watch him, to kill him at some point. And that the resulting cover-up, blaming just Oswald alone, who may or may not have had involvement, was specifically to cover up the fact that the mafia was at that time powerful enough to kill the U.S. president. And obviously the Secret Service, the CIA, similar groups wouldn't want that getting out because it'd make them look weak. And future presidents might rescind their ability to even operate. But I think that's less likely. I think they were directly involved in killing him. RFK, similar. The same folks that convinced, in my opinion, LBJ that JFK was off his rocker, that he would start a nuclear war, that he was in bed with the mob or whatever, and thus he needed to be removed, probably convinced him that RFK, as a direct challenger, should be removed as well. And of course he gave his consent. He didn't want to have to run against RFK, because RFK would have curb-stomped his ass back to the Stone Age in an electoral sense if he had actually run against him. So RFK gets whacked. Marilyn Monroe ties in. JFK and RFK were almost certainly both boffing her. And when you have that sort of high-powered mistress who has apparently at least above-average intellect, the conversation may not necessarily be just about how much JFK wants to slide inside her slidey hole. It's entirely possible that he was bugged the whole time he was doing that, accidentally told her a little bit too much, and the CIA decided to drug and destroy her. Her own death is just as mysterious. It ties in with JFK and RFK. Like I said, the one central thing here that never made sense is that these two related individuals, they're relatives from the same administration with similar platforms and the same political foe from the inside of the establishment, which is LBJ. He's the one that ties it all together. Supposedly were killed in separate incidents by individuals who were not acting in tandem along any ideology, both under strange circumstances, both with a seeming blackout, a seeming cover-up thereafter. I do not believe Sirhan was responsible for killing RFK. I don't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. Now, who actually did? I have no clue. The cover-up was significant enough so that it's probably impossible at this point to judge who done it. But that's my opinion anyway. It could be just a total tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. You hear things all the time. Oh, the grassy knoll. Oh, the Secret Service stand down, and all of these weird events. it's a little bit too mysterious. There are too many things in both cases that don't seem to fit together for me to accept that the official storyline is true. At the bare minimum, I expect that there was a cover-up, that it was part of a much larger conspiracy to kill JFK. Even if we assume the CIA wasn't involved, the LBJ wasn't involved, the Secret Service did nothing wrong, and were just drunk the day before, and some of the agents weren't there because they were hungover, which is sort of their official storyline now, I guess, for why there weren't agents riding the tail fins of JFK's vehicle. Even if we assume all of that, at the very least, they got caught with their pants down, they panicked, and they covered up the fact that it was it wasn't just a lone nut, it was an organized event. It was meant to be and planned beforehand by groups that were more powerful. If it was the Soviet Union that killed JFK as retaliation for the Cuban Missile Crisis, do you honestly think for a moment that the CIA or the Secret Service wanted the public to know that that was the case? Of course not. People would be rallying to go nuke the Ruskies. And that would cause some diplomatic problems at a touchy time in American history. So even if it was a mundane case of, communist agents killed our president, they still wouldn't let you know that that was the case. I expect that in the future there will be at least partial disclosure of what really happened in these two assassination attempts, but I wouldn't look for it yet. I would think that until most of the boomers that would feel really, really sensitive about it were dead, they're not going to disclose shit. And they probably will in the future. The government has a habit of doing this. We find out 50, 100 years later that something screwy went on, the Gulf of Tonkin or whatever it happens to be. It'll eventually be partially disclosed, but they're going to wait. It's like 9/11. We don't have full disclosure on 9/11 about the real circumstances surrounding what the hell was Cheney doing there, what the hell was Bush doing, why wasn't he immediately dragged to a bunker, why was he just sitting there pretending to read to a group of kindergartners. Why didn't we immediately respond to the fact that most of these people were Saudi Arabians? All of that will remain unknown until my generation and probably Gen X are old and gray, because that's the way they operate. They don't have to worry about disclosing that there was a cover-up or a conspiracy or something, as long as most of the people that were directly impacted by that period of time are deceased or too old to go protest or something like that. When it becomes just a dim memory, just a facet of American history. But JFK, RFK, Marilyn Monroe, these figures are still iconic within the American lexicon. They're still held up on a pedestal, and they're seen as almost as though they're still alive, especially with JFK himself. Until that time passes, 10, 20 years from now, don't expect full disclosure. But I don't believe the official storyline on either of these killings. I think there was involvement either from within our government or by a foreign actor of some sort, whether it's Cuba, the Soviet Union, the mafia, whatever it happens to be. And because they got caught with their pants down at a bare minimum, just like with 9/11, at a bare minimum, there was total ineptitude at every level. They didn't want to lose their mandate to keep existing. That is the Secret Service and related intelligence agencies and security agencies, because it would look so terrible. People would be calling for heads to roll. People would be calling for the dissolution of agencies that were involved in such a thing, especially after RFK. Can you imagine if these two really are unrelated killings, unrelated assassinations? You have a sitting president and then his relative who is also campaigning to be president, both assassinated in a relatively short period of time, with the Secret Service and all these other agencies powerless to stop it. It makes them look very, very weak. They wouldn't want the official story getting out on either of them. It would be rather difficult for their mandate to continue existing. That's about all. Peace out.